Start streaming again. Come on. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Are we back on? Come on. Come on. I don't know if I'm getting any response yet. I'm not getting any response from my YouTube browser. I wonder if there's a way for me to patch OBS into StreamYard instead.
Maybe you'll have to just shut it down entirely and restart.
Well, supposedly, I can't even tell if it's going on or not. If the stream is live or not. I mean, are we live? Fuck. Are we live? Fuck. Okay. So, anyway, well, okay, sorry folks, but it seems that I'm not getting yes, you are. Fuck, says Night Shift. Alright, I'm going to mute my phone here. This might have to be the way that I examine the chat for right now because holy shit, that was horrifying. Sorry, people, the stream cut off there. I've had this happen before with OBS. I hope that the last stream that happened is not completely executed off of the internet entirely because there was a whole lot of good dialogue right there. I can all shit. I'll have to take a look at it some other time. This is a freaking nightmare right here. Seriously. I don't know. I guess I'll just continue on with the article for what I have so far right now. I'm gonna have to see after this live stream if I had lost that first half of the live stream. I hope not because there's some good dialogue right there. Myth number 7. Guns make women safer. Fact check. In 2013, more than 5 times more women were shot by husbands, boyfriends, and ex-partners than murdered by male strangers. Okay. Hey, Rational Outlaw, you know that CDC statistic when it comes to self-defense? Does it break it down by gender by any chance? Because apparently these guys are now... excuse me.
I don't think so, but I'd have to look at the exact source. I usually get it from a secondary source, not the primary source, but it may or may not. I'm not exactly sure.
I'm going to be honest. When I looked at that stat myself, it was from a secondary source as well. Again, sorry everybody for the crappy connection. And again, hopefully that last live stream lasted. I should rename this part 2 of the live stream. Or I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do. OBS was just being retarded. I think it's overuse on CPU, my CPU or something. I'm not for absolute certain. But I would have to ask how many of those cases of self-defense are done by women. And we're kind of running across a problem here of where that in the citing of this statistic right here, Rational Outlaw, we are mentioning the raw numbers. They are, well, actually, they aren't even mentioning the raw numbers, nor are they even mentioning per capita. They're just saying 5 times more. 5 times more than what? More than 5 times more women were shot by husbands, boyfriends, and ex-partners than murdered by male strangers. Okay. Well, putting aside murdered by male strangers, because that's almost irrelevant as far as the argument goes and trying to compare murder versus defense. Compare that 5 times more women shot by family members to how many women self-defend. not by how many of them are murdered successfully by male strangers. That's almost you're formulating your argument in a very unconvincing way, Mother Jones. A woman's chances of being killed by her abuser increase more than 5 times if he has access to a gun. Chances of being killed. I mean, obviously, gun is going to make it easier for people to kill, but it's also going to make it easier for people to self-defend. And I think the argument when it comes to guns make women safer is the idea that if a woman herself was to own a gun, not if just people around her own guns. And really, if she is like surrounded by malicious people and they're the only ones who own guns, well, then obviously it's not going to necessarily make the woman safer.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean, breaking it down on a case-by-case basis. But still, if the woman herself was to own a gun, it'd be a different circumstance. One study found that women in states with higher gun ownership rates were 4.9 times more likely to be murdered by a gun than women in states with lower gun ownership rates. And if you were to ban those guns, the husband or whoever in those domestic abuse cases are probably going to find some other way. Maybe even just strangle the woman to death instead. Myth number 8. Vicious, violent video games deserve more blame than guns. Okay, this is going to probably be the point of where that we all agree with Mother Jones, because blaming video games is a bit of a falsehood of normie conservatives. But anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Fact check. So said NRA Executive Vice President Wayne LaPierre after the Newtown massacre. So what's up with Japan? Per capita spending on video games. United States, $44. Japan, $55. Civilian firearms per 100 people. United States, 88. Japan, 0.6. Annual gun homicides. United States, 11,000. Japan, 6. Okay. And here's my question. How many other crimes happen in Japan? Because...
to be fair, Japan has a low. It's not very good for them to even use Japan, because Japan has a very low any crime in a general sense.
Yeah,
their culture is very different.
They have a little bit more of a stricter immigration policy in general, and also the fact that they are like an island nation. So it's kind of hard for violent criminals to sneak into that country. Whereas in the United States, if you were to like ban guns or whatever, you still like have high amounts of crime, probably more focused on the border, but still cartels, drug cartels and whatnot.
And they're a very homogenous society, not just ethnically, but also religiously. They're very pretty much very similar, so they don't have as many disagreements with each other.
I guess there's a point to be made there, but yeah. And also, this kind of raises the point as well. Like, I know that I'm kind of coming out of left field with this, but when it comes to like comparing the gun murder rates of other countries with ours, you have to consider all the statistics. Like, when Australia implemented their gun buyback program, the preceding years after it was implemented, they had a decrease in gun murders, granted, yes, but they also had an increase in home invasions, robberies, and non-gun related assault cases.
And they also have to look at the fact that murder rates were dropping even before the gun buyback program.
Well, yeah, there is that, but even that aside, there's still like the other crimes that people would have been able to prevent and defend themselves from if they owned a gun. So, really, when it comes to why we're for gun ownership, we are not just for gun ownership because we want to prevent gun murders. We're also for gun ownership because we want to prevent general crime, and also because we want to resist the government as well for if the government gets too tyrannical. Let's not forget that. Thank you, Thomas Jefferson. But still, nonetheless, Myth number 9: more and more Americans are becoming gun owners. Oh god! If you're saying that's a myth, I'm going to say that that's a pretty bald-faced lie.
Well, I'm
Honestly,
not exactly sure about that, so I can't say one way or the other. I've never looked at the studies. I only all I know is that there are more guns than ever. That is true.
I mean, generally speaking, gun ownership has kind of increased for. It, I would have
It's
to actually
probably
research the numbers, but it seems to be a general fact that gun purchases go up every time that there's like a
yeah,
massive push for
yeah.
gun
Gun
control.
purchases go up, but you also have to think about the average uh, gun owner has multiple guns. That because I don't, no, I can't say how many gun owners there are. I really don't know, but uh, I'm not sure if it's increasing or decreasing. I don't think it's decreasing.
Yeah,
At the most, it might be maybe increasing somewhat, maybe because I'm sure it's probably a lot higher than it was 200 years ago.
yeah. Fact check: more guns are being sold, but they're owned by a shrinking portion of the population. About half of Americans said they had a gun in their homes in 1973. Today, about 37% say they do. I almost want to call bull on that. Overall, about a third of Americans own a gun. Around 75% of gun owners are men. On average, they own 7.9 guns each. Okay, what are you citing here? I'd probably have to like take another look back at this article here, folks. But right now, we are just like responding generally to the claims here.
Yeah, I think they might be right on the number of guns they're owned. As I said, they're when someone is a gun owner, most gun owners tend to have a lot of multiple number of guns, but that's not really an important factor really in all of this.
Monkey cage, the heck? Murder rate, violent crime rate, afraid to walk alone at night in neighborhood, with gun in home, with gun percentage with gun in home, percentage with pistol or shotgun in home. Gun ownership in America. Percentage with gun in home. Percentage with gun in. Okay, okay. They're both the same statistic. Uh. Really, it doesn't seem to be that much of a decrease, all honesty. Monkey cage. I would have to. Okay. I don't know.
Also, we have to look at the what's the increase of the population size because what was the population size in what was it, 1970s they said? Because even
1959, actually.
because even if we look we also have to look at the the population growth because the population growth could change some of those factors of how much it truly dropped in gun ownership overall.
Yeah.
Because
The raw, yeah,
even if it's technically,
the raw number of gun owners is going to increase with. I mean, if the percentage like remains relatively the same, the percentage of gun owners remains relatively the same, then obviously the raw number of gun owners is going to increase as the population number increases.
because like think of it like this: you have 10 people, uh, half of them own guns. Yeah, a year later that doubles in number of population. You get 20 people the next year, and you still only have 5 people. Maybe it goes up one or two, and then it's technically a gun ownership decrease.
Yeah.
So the whole point is it really going down, or is it just the population is growing faster than the number of people who want to own guns?
Yep. Anyway, so moving on a little bit past that though, I closed down my chat on my phone. I'm not able to like see the chat
I'm able to
on
see
my
the chat. I have it up here.
I I'm not able to see it on my computer. I'm able to see it on my phone. Anyway,
Yes, yes, you're correct, JC. The crime in the U.S. has been dropping since the 90s.
all right. Myth number 10. We don't need more gun laws. We just need to enforce the ones we have. Fact check. Weak laws and loopholes backed by the gun lobby have made it easier for people to get guns illegally. What?
I mean, that's kind of a weird argument.
Weak laws and loopholes backed by the gun lobby have made it easier for people to get guns illegally. How does that?
I mean, it would probably make it more guns are illegal because you made it more difficult to get it legally. So it may be bad. That's kind of a weird argument, I find.
I mean, what loophole are you specifically talking about? If they're talking, I swear, if they are talking about the gun background loophole, or gun show loophole, excuse me. If they're talking about the gun show loophole, I'm going to flip my shit here. Because, here's the thing. Gun owners, not every single gun transaction is going to be kept track of real good enough to enforce a gun background check, and because of that, not every single gun transaction is going to, well, ultimately have a gun background or crime background check of any kind, actually, for that matter.
And the problem with if they really wanted to have a no loopholes, or as they say, or whatever, that would require basically having every single gun in the United States having to be registered, and then people having to be watched to making sure that they didn't sell their guns without the government background checks, which would be not only a major infringement on the Second Amendment, but would be a major infringement on the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, really. I mean, really, the supposed loophole is not an actual in-paper written loophole. It's just a lack of any law, really, in all reality. And existing gun laws aren't preventing guns from getting into the wrong hands. Doesn't that kind of make the case, though, that more gun laws isn't going to work? I mean, that's kind of a self-defeating argument for your own case there, Mother Jones.
What was it? I missed it.
And existing gun laws aren't preventing guns from getting into the wrong hands.
Yeah, that probably was not a great one to post there.
Like you just showed it yourself that more gun laws isn't going to necessarily prevent crime. If anything, just double down on those particular laws. Don't make more laws on top of that. Well, actually, ethically speaking, depending on what the law is, the law should probably ultimately be repealed. But pertaining to the argument itself, though, still, more than 75% of weapons used in mass shootings between 1982 and 2012 were obtained legally. Excuse me. Yeah. I mean, I'm not going to make a bold claim. Like, I don't know specifically of how many guns in mass shootings are used and how many are not used or obtained legally or illegally.
Well, I believe that's false. Like, it's half true, really, because the people who got the gun legally would be like often the parents or a relative, and then that person who wanted to commit the mass shooting took the gun from their relative and then used it to commit a mass shooting. So technically it was gotten legally, but then the person who wanted to commit the mass shooting stole it from their relative to kill people.
I'm really taking too long on like responding to these two bits of this video and this article. Like, geez. And I still have like 3 more articles. I'm probably just going to do 1 more article after this and then call it good.
Aww.
Because it's getting late here. It's 9:27 where I'm at. And I've been like streaming since at least 7:10, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Or with an interruption anyways. Obviously. That freaking cutout in the connection right there. As much as 40% of all guns... As much as 40% of all gun sales involve private sellers and don't require background checks.
That's
That
probably true.
that's
But that's between like relatives and friends or people selling it a gun to just someone. They're not a business or of any sort.
In a survey, 40% of prison inmates who used guns in their crimes said they'd gotten them this way. More than 80% of gun owners support closing this loophole. Loophole, quote unquote. It's not a loophole, it's a lack of law is what it is.
Yeah, and I am not for getting rid of that because that would, as I said, not only be an infringement on the second, but also the fourth, because that just requires a gun registry, which is way, way overboard.
Mm. An investigation found that 62% of online gun sellers were willing to sell to buyers who said they couldn't pass a background check. When researchers posed as illegal straw buyers, 20% of licensed California gun dealers agreed to sell handguns to them. Okay. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives did not have a permanent director for 7 years due to an NRA backed requirement that the Senate approve nominees. What? Anyway, that's the end of the article right here.
Mm.
So it's kind of hit and miss. I'm going to be honest. Like, it kind of stumped me on a few things, but there was just some parts of where that it was outright crap. And it still shows that Mother Jones is not a website that I would take with hardly any credibility.
Yeah, they really don't have any credibility.
All right. So, if any of y'all like remember a couple episodes ago or a few episodes ago of Strike Force, I got reading about how that there was some chipping away at Obamacare that the Trump administration was doing, and this I am presuming is the results of that chipping away of Obamacare. So, Trump officials claim $11 billion in annual savings from rollback of Obama joint employer labor rule. Or, I don't know. Never mind. It's probably something else entirely. But let's just read it nonetheless. Trump officials claim $11 billion in annual savings from rollback of Obama joint employer labor rule. Trump officials justified a new effort to roll back the Obama administration's pro-union joint employer rule by arguing that it would have hurt not only businesses but also workers. The Trump administration said the controversial rule would have reduced a real income by $11 billion a year. Yeah, nothing mentioning about Obamacare, so that's my mistake, people. Sorry. The Labor Department announced Sunday that it was formally replacing the Obama rule, which said that businesses could be held liable for workplaces at another business if they had indirect control over the latter. The administration restored the pre-Obama standard, which said liability only applied in cases of direct control, and added further clarification. When we lift the heavy hand of government and allow businesses to create jobs, enter new markets, and compete at lower prices, every American wins, wrote Labor Secretary Eugene Scalia and acting White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney in a Wall Street Journal op-ed. Citing the White House Council of Economic Advisors, they stated that the Obama-era rules imposed annual net costs of $5 billion and reduced incomes by $11 billion. The Obama rule was controversial and the business community lobbied hard. Okay, I'm just going to say it seems like it's not like saving $11 billion in fiscal spending of the government, which that's a little bit of a shame, but I'm still seeing a positive growth here in at least the private economy. I do not know how you're reading it, Rash.
But yeah, I would agree with you.
Unless there's something I'm missing, something I'm just getting plain confused about. The Obama rule was controversial, and the business community lobbied hard to have it rolled back. Critics argued it would cause many corporations to pull out of franchising altogether rather than risk the additional legal liability. This resolution provides much needed clarity for the 733,000 franchise establishments across America and returns to the traditional standard of business that has fundamentally supported and encouraged franchise entrepreneurship,
Entrepreneurship.
for decades, said Robert Crescenti, president of the International Franchise Association. Unions and pro-labor activists scorned the move, arguing that it only protects corporations. New Trump rule will make it easier for companies to cheat workers and get away with it, tweeted the National Employment Law Project. End of article. And yeah, I feel like a fool right now, honestly, thinking that that had anything to do with Obamacare. Oops. Okay, so I think I'm just going to like read this and save this for another time. But this article right here is Trump's budget shows why we're doomed. I'm going to save that for some other time, I think, folks. But for right now, we're going to read about this because this is a little bit old. I'm a bit late trying to get to this article. But it goes talking about NAFTA replaced. Trump signs USMCA trade deal with Canada and Mexico. The biggest reason why I'm going to read this instead of this is because it's a little bit shorter too, and I just want to get this done. President Trump signed the U.S.-Mexico-Canada Agreement on Trade Wednesday, overriding the 1993 North American Free Trade Agreement and fulfilling one of his 2016 campaign promises. Okay. I do not know about you, Rash, but trade was definitely one of the things that I disagreed with Trump on. Not only because of the whole liberties aspect of it, but also because NAFTA, there was a video that I watched talking about as to how that NAFTA allowed more fluid trade of avocados between Mexico and U.S., and so therefore there was a higher supply of avocados, just as an example of one of the positives of NAFTA, and also cheaper shoe production too.
I would, excuse me, I'd have to look at it myself because I really don't know much on what NAFTA did or did not do. So I can't really say one way or the other.
Yeah. But what's your opinion on Trump's opinions on trade? Do you generally agree or disagree with him when it comes to free trade
Well, as far as the
versus
tariffs
tariffs?
idea, I don't like him threatening with tariffs and everything. I think he could have handled that much better. However, I will give him some credit that he has been somewhat successful within some of the countries. For example, with Mexico, with threatening tariffs on them, with immigration, he was successful in that. And so far, he's being moderately successful with the tariffs on China, it looks
I would
like.
disagree when it comes to China.
I said that's why I said moderately successful. I know I'm not saying he's completely successful, but
I don't
for the hmm?
personally. I honestly don't see as to how he's being even moderately successful. I mean, uh, with this, okay, I do not know explicitly of what tariffs he would have had to do that would have like hurt farmers, but his tariffs have led to hurting farmers in that he had to like cover up that wound with a band-aid of giving them subsidies. So it's kind of
Yes, yes. As I said, I disagree with that entirely. I don't think he should be using tariffs as a bargaining tool. I don't think it's a very good idea. I think there's better ways to handle that.
and not to
Or if you're going
mention
to do tariffs or threaten with tariffs, you have to get other countries on board with it. For
okay.
example, you have to get the European, many of the European countries to also get with you if you wanted to uh, sort of push your weight on them. Because the United States doing itself, although it has a strong economy, it would be much easier to get uh, China to do what's good for us and for others by working with the other countries.
Mm, uh, fair point, I guess. I also like wanted to mention as to how his tariff war with China has kind of set off China to want to play the rare earths card, quote unquote, with us. Aspie, the incredible Aspie actually did a pretty good video about this. China has like a large deposit when it comes to rare earths. Like I think one of them is like uranium, and there's some other forms of metals and minerals that they have that we don't, or at least that we aren't tapping into. Like we have our own reserves when it comes to minerals and natural resources, but there are two things that Trump could do. Like A, get rid of the regulations that is preventing us from tapping into our own resources so that we don't have to be as reliant on China,
That's
for
another
one
thing I
thing.
would be for. Yeah,
Yeah.
I would also agree with you getting rid of certain regulations or trying to find a way, a new trading partners and everything without having to go with the tariffs. Find every other option possible. And as you said, like the deregulation, but also like finding different partners to trade with so that we're not so reliant on China. And we do have a major problem with so much reliance on China for the fact that our medical industry, like a large percentage of our medical supplies comes from China.
Yeah. I when it comes to tariffs, what I have to say to Trump and all the Trumpists out there that are like all approving and whatnot of his tariff wars, I have to say incentivize companies to stay by lifting regulations and decreasing and even abolishing the minimum wage, for example.
Well, the
Instead,
federal minimum wage because it's going to be difficult to get the states to abolish it
right.
their own.
Instead of disincentivizing them to move to other countries by interacting these coercive tariffs, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Um. Anyway, today we finally. I mean, if you like lift regulations, you are not going to be some all controlling authoritarian in that kind of way. Whereas with putting in the tariffs, you are going to be leaning yourself more into authoritarianism with that. Anyway, today we finally end the NAFTA nightmare, Trump said at a White House signing event while surrounded by hard hat wearing supporters. The president argued USMCA would give workers a fairer deal by making companies invest more in the United States rather than outsourcing. This is something we really put our hearts into. It is probably the main reason why I chose to live this crazy life. The deal keeps most of NAS excuse me. The deal keeps most of NAFTA intact but adds provisions aimed at ending outsourcing of manufacturing jobs to Mexico. By what? Banning companies from doing it? Oh god. Just to get more of the government involved and just intervening in the
Well, yeah,
economy.
a better way would be to for two things. One, as you said, deregulation. Just get rid of, if not all, at least a good percentage of the federal regulations, and also somehow create maybe some kind of incentives, other incentives, maybe not subsidies or anything, but maybe figure out some other
Yeah.
way to incentivize companies to stay, either through encouraging them to be more patriotic, to help the people in America. Why leave when you can help uh, not only
Yeah.
have a, because there are ways in which companies can stay. It's difficult, but there are ways that companies can stay and produce within high cost in countries like the United States and still provide jobs. It's
Mm-hmm.
difficult, but it is possible.
Limiting the use of supply chains abroad and opening up Canada to more U.S. farm goods, such as dairy products. Okay. In what way opening up Canada to more U.S. farm goods? Are you saying we are like retracting some of our own regulations, or it's mandating Canada to retract some of their own regulations to open up those roads? Like, as much as I would like Canada to be a little bit more economically libertarian in that area, ultimately I don't really think that it is the job of the US to be intervening and dictating Canada. I mean, that's a thing with these trade deals. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Like, on the one hand, it will allow companies to do as they please, but on the other hand, these trade deals are kind of us telling, I don't know, intervening in other companies and what they should or should not do. But then again,
Mm-hmm.
maybe one could like make the point that it's we lift up this regulation and you lift up that regulation. Maybe it's like a well, not so much of a quid pro quo between two politicians, but between two nations and their economies.
Mm-hmm.
The deal is a big win for the technology industry, which got protections for digital trade, prohibitions on forced data localization, and enhanced copyright provisions. Oh, God. What do you mean? What kind of copyright provisions? I gotta ask. because I am rather skeptical when it comes to copyright as a generality. The deal had a rocky road to Wednesday's signing. While the underlying deal was signed by the three countries in late 2018, it spent most of the next year stuck in Congress. House Democrats and their union allies argued that the USMCA lacked significant enforcement provisions. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi engaged in extensive negotiations with the White House to amend the deal. To amend the deal. U.S. Trade Representative Robert Lighthizer, how do you pronounce that, negotiated on behalf of the administration, and a deal was finally reached in December. The Senate passed USMCA earlier this month with strong bipartisan support. Democrats claim the torturous negotiations vastly improved USMCA by strengthening its labor provisions. I'm getting tongue-tied here. Been streaming for too long. We rescued the flawed NAFTA 2.0 that didn't have the votes to pass the House, Representative Earl Blumenauer, an Oregon Democrat, told reporters. Democrats nevertheless criticized the deal for not including additional language addressing climate change.
Oh, dear God.
Oh, brother. Not another Paris deal, but even more hard-handed, more heavy-handed deal of the Paris Agreement. Like, geez.
The Paris Climate Agreement was such crap. I mean, even climate scientists have said that was such a crappy deal.
Yeah, not only a crappy deal, but it's also like a big paper tiger. Like, I'm just...
Yeah, it would do nothing. It would only hurt industry, and if they really believe in a catastrophic global warming, even the climate scientists said that deal would do pretty much nothing to stop it.
Right.
Like nothing. Like really nothing.
Like it tells us it gives kind of heavy-handed recommendations to the U.S., but says fuck all as far as India and China go. The White House did not invite any Democratic leaders to the signing. Lighthizer noted that NAFTA had been controversial at the time of its passage, and USMCA was meant to change the stale consensus on trade by creating a bipartisan policy. The deal requires that 75%... Oh, excuse me. Sorry about that, folks. The deal requires that 75% of an automobile's parts be made in North America to be duty-free, up from 62.5%, and that at least 40% be built by people making at least $16 an hour. The provisions are intended to make outsourcing to Mexico less attractive. The provisions will cost the industry $3 billion in additional tariffs over the next decade, the Congressional Budget Office has estimated. The projected economic benefits of the deal are marginal. A study by the International Trade Commission, a federal agency, found it would raise U.S. gross domestic product by $68 billion, about 0.35%, and add 176,000 jobs nationwide, an increase of 0.12% in employment for many businesses, simply ensuring that the underlying free trade provisions of NAFTA remain intact. Despite Trump's earlier threat to pull the U.S. out of the deal was a key goal. The USMCA will finally provide manufacturers the certainty they need to keep reaching for new heights and secure the millions of American jobs that depend on North American trade, said National Association of Manufacturers President Jay Timmons in an end of article. I would probably have to look at some other piece of some other piece of literature in regards of this trade agreement right here, because it's looking like a mixed bag, but still. What do you think, Rash?
I would agree it might be a mixed bag, but I'd have to look at it more. As I said, I would like to look at it more myself, perhaps sometime maybe. But yeah, I would probably agree with you. It's probably a mixed bag.
But I think I'm going to end the stream right now because, man, that cutoff in the connection, that was really quite the bummer. Sorry, folks, for that. And I'm sorry that it was, honestly, it was kind of cringy at points in this live stream. Not going to lie. Particularly when it came to some points of responding to Burger Craig. Although I still think that the point remains as to why I personally would never support Andrew Yang in any public office. Honestly, I mean, just
Hmm.
have him remain as a businessman. I'm sure he's good as a businessman, but with what he wants to propose, UBI, GND, and anti-free speech organizations to monitor the internet, just that sets a very bad Orwellian precedent in of itself. But yeah, just
Hmm.
because of that, I say no to Yang. Period.
Hmm.
Anything you got to say before I turn this off, Rash?
Just if you're watching this still, subscribe to my channel at Rational Outlaw.
Yep, subscribe to Rational Outlaw. He is a more consistent uploader than me, so yeah. Whenever I am doing basically nothing, he'll probably have something at least interesting to upload while I'm dormant. But anyway, for y'all that have tuned in, particularly for part 1 of this live stream, as this will probably be named part 2, see y'all later. Good night and God bless.